Amazing. So I did try to buy a mic that was not my earphone mics from Amazon. I bought like a $10 lavalier mic. And it turns out that it was much worse than my earphone mics. So for those of you who have shared the feedback that the audio quality needs to get better, it's going to be a little while. All right. Now to the actual content of today's Whiteboard Wednesday. I want to talk about experimentation versus attribution. And if for some reason you follow me on socials, you've seen me recently be very anti-attribution, in particular anti-MTA. And I'm going to share why I am anti-MTA and why I believe significantly more in experimentation. I think incrementality is a very good form of experimentation. So let's just say you have a customer journey where that customer sees an ad, then does not visit the site. Then they see that same ad and they visit the site. Then somewhere else they see a different ad. So I'm calling it ad two. And they go to the site, they go all the way to the cart. Then they go back to ad one and they visit the site, and then ad two, and they go all the way to checkout, and then this is where the purchase happens, right? Attribution's job is to assign credit for which ad had impact on that person's purchase, right? So the different attribution models, like first touch, if you were to say it's a first touch attribution, then what you would say is, and by the way, this is like, and I chose this example purposely, but first touch would mean ad one is the reason this person bought. And it doesn't matter what happens after they see the ad. Last touch would mean ad two is the reason they bought, right? So it's like, hey, the last thing they saw before they made the purchase. And for simplicity, let's just say this is a Meta ad and then this is a Google ad, okay? So that way we're also having different channels. So this thing is like as simplified as possible. And so this Google ad is the reason they checked out. So then now you're assigning that revenue to your Google spend. Now you go to multi-touch attribution. And the problem with multi-touch attribution is you're trying to assign credit, meaning you're trying to describe what happens to 100% of revenue. And then of that 100% of revenue, where should you assign credit for that revenue? So the total revenue number by definition will actually be your total revenue number in Shopify, right? That's like, anyway, yeah, that is by definition. Fine. So if I were to take a multi-touch attribution model, you can create whatever model type you want, right? And so that's why a lot of model providers, they're black box about the actual model and they don't tell you what's happening under the hood. But let's just take a simple one, which is like a uniform distribution on the ads. So it's like, okay, I'm just going to uniformly assume that for everything that you see, I'm going to assign equal credit. So let's say it's a $10 purchase. I'm going to say $6 came from ad one and $4 came from ad two, right? Now let's say it's a majority touch model. It's like, hey, the thing that you saw the most of, I'm going to give it all of the credit, right? Then what would happen is ad one you saw 3 times, so it would get all of the credit, right? Ad one would get $10 of credit. Now let's say you say, hey, I'm actually going to weight the ads based on the depth that you go into in the funnel. So if you visit the website, you get 2 points. If you don't visit, you only get 1 point. If you get all the way to the cart, you get 3 points. Visit 2 points, and then the checkout is 4 points, right? Now what'll happen is that ad two gets 7 points, ad one gets 5 points out of 12, right? And so roughly what's going to happen is, again, ad one is roughly going to get $6 worth of credit, ad two is going to get roughly $4 worth of credit. And the problem with all of these models is that you're just sort of making up some mechanism by which you believe you should assign credit to these different ads. And it's sort of why a lot of the best marketers that I know, what they'll do is they will look at in-platform attribution, which is like essentially like, hey, the platform is saying this is the ad that drove the purchase over this time horizon. They will look at a last touch model in, something like GA or Triple Whale or whatever. They will look at first touch, and then they'll try to like triangulate based on all of the different attribution models. What do they think is like actually the right way to be assigning the next dollar to a certain campaign. And this brings me to experimentation, right? So experimentation's job is to tell you, hey, is this thing incrementally more or less useful? And so what you would do is you would just have you would have two audiences and you can split it however you want. Geography is a very normal way to split it, but it kind of doesn't matter how you split it. You have a set of your audience that gets exposed to to both, and then you have a set of your audience that only gets exposed to one, right? So let's just say, hey, there's a geography in which I'm going to turn off Google Ads, and there's a geography in which I'm going to keep both on. And then it turns out for in the geography in which I had both on, I am getting $12 per average person, and the geography in which I had only Meta on, I am getting $8. Then what it's telling you is like, okay, actually turning on Google drives an incremental $4 per average site visitor. And that is actually the more useful metric because, and by the way, as you increase spend, like this incremental delta will change by definition, but it is at least telling you, hey, I know what happens when I turn this off, instead of the previous world in which you are sort of arbitrarily assigning credit to the $10, because in the credit assignment model, you might end up making different decisions for where the dollar should be spent, right? So I had come up with like these examples where I said like, hey, ad one ends up getting $6 worth of credit, ad two ends up getting $4 worth of credit. Let's say what the MTA actually shows is that with both on you get 12, but with only Meta on you get 11. Your MTA model is assigning $4 worth of credit for every $10 to Google. Your Google spend looks way more efficient than what the incremental dollars is telling you. And this is like a very common thing to have happen, right? Or very normal. Common is a different word, but normal thing to have happen where something that is trying to ascribe value on a multi-touch attribution basis is actually pointing you in a different direction than something that is telling you where the incremental dollar is having a certain amount of impact. So anyway, this is where why I think it's very important to just keep in mind what each of the tools is useful for. And I think on the last piece that I'll say very quickly is that attribution, by definition, has like very little to say about what is happening after the click, precisely because it is trying to assign credit to the channels, like assign credit to the channel spend, right? And so it is like these are all different jobs that different tools have. And so anyway, keep that in mind as you think about what measurement technique is going to be most impactful to you, and how to think about when to run things on experiments versus when to run things on attribution. All right, I know this is a long one, but I'll see you in the next one.